Hi guys! The beta is finally over and we have our first Undying Dynasties book. For those that don't know, Undying Dynasties is the army of the Nabteshi pharaohs, so proud that they just dismiss something as mundane as death stopping them. These pharaohs lead armies of loyal skeletons who follow them even after death, supported by powerful living statues, built by their master artisans, and infused with life by the clergy. On the battlefield, the dynasties live and breathe thanks to magic, with a stable magic phase focused on augmentations and hexes. The army generally lacks armor, but their priests compensate this by resurrecting or healing their fallen warriors. Their characters focus on support roles, turning lowly troops into strong fighters. The army in general is slow, but with some unconventional ways to move thanks to underground ambush, access to light troops in every slot, and magical movement also help. Their blessed arrows blacken the sky, doubly so with the help of their gods. The army excels and requires a good control of the board to engage one enemy at a time and ensure victory. If after this brief description you are still interested, this is probably the best time to start an Undying Dynasty army, as I think this is the best iteration of the book so far. So, I want to give the whole book a review. I will start by commenting on the magic we can use, then our magic items, and how I see them being used, continuing with the characters, whose use I will revisit on some units later, and then finish with the different units, starting from core to rare. Magic, the great equalizer. It not only enables our troops to live or outlive, but also turns our average models into killing machines. We have access to 3 lores: light, death, and sands. One wizard at least has to have sand, and is the Hierophant, the guy who maintains the army alive. Keep this priest alive at all costs because you really don't want to lose him, or your army will slowly start to crumble away. Our unique lore, Sand, offers great synergy with most of our units. The attribute lets us heal our troops, while the spell augments our units or hex the enemy. Most spells have a low casting value and the option to cast them as aura. The low casting value, combined with either the Book of the Dead or the Book of Arcane Power, makes it easy to cast most spells on 2 dice reliably. This enables what I call the Gatling gun casting style, where you throw a ton of spells on 2 dice and let your opponent dispel 1 or 2 of them. To take advantage of this style, you require enough spells, around 6 or 8 in my opinion, to cast on all phases of the game, and it can also be complemented with Salve Conduit. This upgrade is a special option for an hierarch and makes the magic phase considerably more reliable. The lore of Sand works at its best when used on chariots or necropolis guard, who benefit the most from the healing and the needed augments. It also has good synergy with our skeleton archers. Still, the lore has limited effects to use on early turns if you don't complement it with side archers. Definitively an obligatory lore to use with Undying Dynasty. Pun intended. Path of Light is one of the 2 battle magic lores we can use. Light magic has mostly good magic missiles and excellent augments. The signature is an excellent chaff remover, while the number 6 spell can be used to deal with a wide range of ideally armored targets. Having flaming and divine attacks in one and the other adds versatility to those projectiles. The augments have the advantage of a greater range over Sand, which in some lists is really necessary. The spells also help our constructs, by preventing hits against them, so less unlucky 6s, or adding combat resolution, a lesser risk of crumbling in case of rubber lance syndrome. Finally, the offensive augments work well with all our combat-oriented units. Another solid lore which works better with a construct heavy list. And the third lore we can access is the lore of death. This lore prefers to play close and aggressive, with a loft of 18 inches hexes, something that all wizards really dislike. The lore offers some limited options to snipe characters and affect leadership. The army has a few leadership shenanigans we can use with this, but the combos are risky to use. There are some pretty good spells in the lore in my opinion, like my favorite, Curse of Mortality, but less than half the spells work reliably well for us. This lore has use in some niche builds, but I will pass on it in general. Now let's speak about the unique magic items for Undying Dynasty. These are ancient relics that only resurface on time of great need. The first of these items is the Vanquisher Eternal. It's the best weapon we can use on a pharaoh on foot for those that like combat lords. It will add the option to do multiple wounds, helpful against any monstrous model, or to hit multiple models instantly, great against hordes of infantry. Our second unique weapon is the Scourge of Kings. This weapon shines on the hand of a pharaoh, basically duplicating the numbers of attacks. The best weapon choice for any mounted pharaoh. Our next item is the Crown of the Pharaohs, an utility item that lets you use Undying Will on a distant unit, but most importantly, lets you share ballistic skill. Right now, Undying Dynasty shooting works at its best when dealing with chaff or weak unit, so taking a royal character for the ballistic skill improvement is too expensive for the result. Best to use those points in more archers, but in some specific builds it can be helpful. The Armor of Eternities is a pretty simple and useful item. It's a plate mail and adds 1 wound to the user. It's especially useful on our Harbingers, because our other royal characters benefit more from a ward save. The Brooch of the Sun is a defensive talisman that I don't see much use for. Possibly the only use I see is on a hierarch mounted on an Arc of Ages, because it already has a ward, but this item I will pass on it. The Death Mask of the Put is one of those leadership shenanigan items I mentioned before. Its main use is to break someone early by negating either the BSB or the inspiring presence from the general. I prefer it on units of chariots to help them break the enemy even if they fail to negate steadfast. The Sandstorm Cloak is a great item in my opinion. Really helpful against war machines for our mounted characters, like the Arc of Ages, but it also works great to support units vulnerable to shooting. I can see tons of ways to use this item, but my preferred one so far is a Harbinger on an Amut with this item and joining a unit of Shabdis, both protected but an architect nearby. The Chariot of Neferra is a thematic item for dynasties, a chariot army after all, but currently our characters don't offer much to chariot units, and I don't see this item changing that. This is another item I probably won't use. The Book of the Dead makes spells easier to cast to the bearer, and also increase the healing value of its spells. This item really shines on the hands of a hierarch, which also makes spells harder to dispel. A critical item on lists that go strong on non-large constructs, Our final item is the Banner of the Entombed. This is another thematic item, and it helps the underground ambush. It increases the reliability of the ambush nearby the user, but this seriously limits the options to use underground ambush. And the cost is pretty high, since you have to have a defenseless harbinger in addition to the item. Only lists that go really heavy on the underground team will require this item. Let's speak about the Undying Dynasty characters now. Our characters represent one of the cornerstones of the Undying Dynasty playstyle, with a clear focus on buffing our troops. They are force multipliers instead of doing things themselves. Let's start with our wizards, since every army will have at least one of them. All our wizards come from the Dead Cult, where lowly acolytes learn the blessings of the gods, and hierarchs rain down their judgment on the enemy. The hierarch has access to the Soul Conduit, an upgrade that stabilizes the magic phase. It works best when you're going for a Gatling gun casting style. All our wizards also have access to the Archphages, a special type of mount for the wizard. It grants the wizard 2 spells from the Lord of Heavens, a lore we can normally access. It also increases the range of spells by 3 inches, which also affects the attribute, which makes it far easier to use. The automatic spells you get with the Arc make it a good option for a shooting list, since all of them limit mobility or grant the option to force rerolls on successful armor saves. The 2 main drawbacks from this awesome transport is first that the wizard can now be directly targeted, something an item like the Sandstorm Cloak helps with, and the high cost of the mountain itself. If you are interested in using this unit, I really recommend escorting it with a small unit of skeleton warriors. The leaders of our dynasties are the pharaohs and nomarchs, one of the hardest characters out there, with an additional wound and toughness 5, but they do lack the solid defensive options of other armies, so don't overestimate their durability. Both our royal characters have a common rule, Undying Will. This ability lets them share their weapon skill with the unit they join, turning our clumsy skeletons and necropolis guard into pretty deadly elf-like swordsmen. Of the 2, the Pharaoh is the most offensive option, with a bigger number of attacks and greater strength, in addition to access to better offensive gear. The Nomarch, on the other hand, work as a light version, focusing mostly on defense. The high leadership of both characters really helps in case your Hierophant dies to negate the crumble damage. It can also be really helpful in Swift Reform or Battle Reform test. Both reforms can have a big impact on games, so the high leadership is not something to neglect here. If you want to take deadly Necropolis Guard units or spear-wielding skeletons, definitely take one of them. Both characters have the unique option to ride a Royal Sphinx, but since our characters are force multipliers, they don't help as much when mounted on a monster. An 18 inches Inspiring Presence aura is the main benefit, which let us march with far more range. Even so, I expect to see this mount mostly on thematic lists. The Tomb Architect is the builder of all our great constructs. This guy comes to the field to ensure his work remains in one piece. It grants regeneration to a construct unit nearby, making this model a splendid option in all lists focused on constructs. They are also cheap enough that it's difficult not to justify having them on such list. I also have enjoyed using them mounted on horses for construct heavy list. This not only lets them grant regeneration easier, but they can be used as a cheap redirector too. Our last character is the Tomb Harbinger, who brings all the fury of his liege to the battlefield and shares it with other soldiers. He brings hatred to any unit he joins, but he lacks the durability of our real characters and needs to be in the front line, so he requires investment in defensive gear to ensure his survival. Hatred by itself is a pretty good tool, but it's even better when combined with poison, and we have a lot of units with that, especially the Necropolis Guard, who can be used with halberds or paired weapons. Another great unit to use with the Harbinger are Shaptis. Shaptis hit like a truck in close combat, but with only weapon skill 4, they miss half their attacks normally, and with a bit of bad luck, they can suffer from rubber land syndrome. But if you add a Harbinger Amut, you can prevent this problem. Additionally, both will benefit from an Architect, making the Harbinger hard enough to kill. And if you add the Sandstorm Cloak, the unit will also be hard to kill at range. Another aspect of this model is having access to a battle standard bearer. While Undead don't need a battle standard bearer like most mortal armies, it can really work well with construct list, who crumble even less, and can make skeleton tar pits viable. In summary, a really good hero, and most lists could benefit from having one of these guys. Let's speak about our core units now. In my opinion, the core elements in our army are incredibly good, and one of the main reasons I love Undying Dynasties. They include options of redirectors, redirector killers, tar pits, choke troopers, objective holders, and can even have access to strength 5 in core. I have made in fact lists consisting only on core units and characters, which speaks about how versatile our core is. Our most basic unit is the lowly skeleton. With poor stats, they shine in 3 ways: as a cheap escort for our more vulnerable characters, as a durable unit when taken in big enough numbers, ideally with a battle standard bearer nearby, and finally as a decent spear combat unit when taken on big numbers and led by another character. Beware the curse of instability though, and be careful when including skeletons in combats with multiple units, since these guys will lose quite a few models in combat and can make your more elite troops lose quite a few wounds through crumble. Skeleton archers are plain skeletons but with bows instead of shields. Their bows, like all our bows, have been blessed and ignore all penalties to hit. This makes them decent at shooting and can be great if you make use of terrain and intervening models. Their main use is to target unarmored units, typically redirectors. They have excellent synergy with 2 spells from our lore, which makes big units of them an interesting choice. Another common use is to hide ranged characters inside, like wizards or architects, in mid-sized units. Another way to use them is in min-sized units, which can be used as false drops, late game shaft, or auxiliary bunkers if needed. Somehow, my units of 10 skeleton archers tend to outshoot my unit of 30 archers, the curse or blessings of the gods. Chariots are our most iconic unit, and we are the only army capable of having units of chariots with multiple ranks. They can be used in 3 ways: in mid-sized unit and with light troops, as a hard-hitting sacrificial unit, trying to get flank charges and killing light units. Another option is to use them as objective holders, in unit of 3 or 4 and with a banner. With toughness 4, between 9 and 12 wounds, and the ability to move 8 inches even far away from the general, they make a pretty solid objective holder. Their final use is in big units, 6 or more, adding the swiftness banner, and possibly with a character in them. The unit will hit really hard, but requires a charge, so board control is necessary when using this unit. They heal really well with Lord of Sands, and benefit a lot from most of the spells. Also, don't forget they have blessed bows, which can cause unexpected wounds. Mine have been able to bring down wounded monsters even. The final unit in our core selection is the cavalry. These guys are our fastest option in core and one of the few units with access to both Vanguard and Scout. The most common way to use them is as redirectors, where they excel thanks to their high mobility and low cost. Another option is to use them as War Machine Hunters, thanks to their Vanguard move and Scouting. For this role, I will recommend adding light lances to them. Their third use is as a mobile character banker, mainly for architects and wizards. In this role, I really recommend using the bows and light armor, since our characters can't Vanguard nor Scout, and can't be light troops. Their last use is as a secondary objective holders with the light armor upgrade. With Vanguard and the option to march 16 inches, they can easily get into a good position. A really versatile unit, and I will expect most lists to have 1 or 2 units of them at least. And now into Special, which brings unit with one of our most unique mechanic, Underground Ambush, which lets a unit appear anywhere on the battlefield as an ambushing unit. This ability increases the mobility of our otherwise slow army considerably. In Special, we can also find our main hammer units. The Sandstalkers are one of my favorite units with 2 unique abilities. It has a ranged attack, which ignores armor and wounds against initiative. It also has Underground Ambush. You can combine both of them to deal with most and shoot the same turn you appear. This makes the Stalker a pretty reliable monster or monster killer, and it can deal also with cavalry and monstrous models. Its 2 main weaknesses are scattering into close combat, where they are as good as dead, and attacking high initiative models, where they wound only on 6s. This unit solves so many problems that I really recommend having it. Just remember that even if it has Underground Ambush, you don't need to use it, and against fast armies like cavalry list, it may be the best option to deploy it normally. The Doom Cataphract is our monstrous cavalry, and it excels at crushing infantry with strength 4 or less. While this may not sound too appealing, it has the ability to Underground Ambush, letting them choose who they fight. They have a pretty good offensive, with a total of 5 attacks, strength 5, in a combination of poison and lethal strike, and since they can have banners, they can be used as objective holders that can ambush. Our Great Vultures are what I would call a heavy redirector. They are not only our fastest unit, but they also have incredibly good stats, so they can easily slaughter most redirectors in close combat, and can even help on a flank charge. Mine have even killed an ogre battle standard bearer in close combat. A top choice, these birds pass with flying colors in their role as heavy chaff. Necropolis Guard are our elite skeletons, who in life were mummified by their great deeds. They are strong and tough, but armorless and clumsy. They can be used without characters and with shields, as a defensive unit, but they really shine when led by a character or two, and in biggish unit of 30 or more, either with halberds or paired weapons. Sand magic synergizes greatly with them, maintaining their numbers and getting the greatest benefit from the augments. With all these options, the unit can really be turned into an unstoppable machine. Chaptis, on the other hand, are our independent hammer unit. They have a great hitting power, good mobility, and decent defenses, but they are expensive and can't be healed as well. If you take a big unit, definitely add an architect nearby. Another big difference compared to the Necropolis Guard is that Shaptis prefer light magic instead of sands, which benefits them more. Still, if you prefer sands, you can use the Book of the Dead to heal them better. In my experience, halberds work better in bigger units, and with strength 6, the Shapti can deal with almost anything. Paired weapons, on the other hand, work better for smaller units. But both weapons can be used in any size. Bows and unarmed Shaptis are usable, but they tend to pale in comparison with the other options in our book. Shaptis are a solid unit which breaks the stereotype of needing synergy to work well. Sand Scorpions are our third unit with underground ambush. These deadly scorpions excel at killing war machines and characters hiding in bunkers. With their good stats, they can also help on combined combats against stronger enemies. And with their high speed, they can also be used as an emergency redirector. A versatile unit at a decent price. I like it. And now to our final underground ambushing unit, the Scarab Swarm. In other armies, these guys will excel, but with heavy competition on ambushers and chaff unit in our army, the unique role it can fulfill is pretty limited. They are good at killing war machines, thanks to poison, and they can also do some damage, but they have weak defenses, which makes them dangerous to use in combined combat. The Entombed Banner opens up a new way to use them as a cheap and reliable chaff thanks to only 1d6 inches scatters. And now to our first monster, the Battle Sphinx. This one is tough as granite, with high toughness combined with an impressive number of attacks. This unit is an elite infantry landmower, and while it excels at killing infantry, it can also deal with other things without much fear. Its main weakness is poison, really high strength attacks, volume of attacks, or some rotten luck. Just keep repairing it with sand magic, and this monster can really turn into an unbreakable wall. The bread weapon adds some insurance to prevent crumble, and is a way to deal with some undesirable fast units. This makes the Battle Sphinx a good choice on most lists. And let's discuss now our rarest unit, with our hardest hitting monsters are our long range war machines. Also, we have Reapers here. Winged Reapers are a powerful and flying unit which we share with the shameless vampires. Reapers bring two things we don't have anywhere else. First is our only unit capable of marching outside the general range, which combined with his strong stats make him a great flanker unit. Second, when using paired weapon, is our only unit which can have Initiative 5. This elf-like speed, which can be boosted further with our light magic, make it our fastest hitting model. But each wound of these guys is pretty expensive, so I recommend including a wizard with the Book of the Dead if you have them. And each ability not to forget is Necromantic Aura, which can be useful in Construct heavy lists. And now to the big monsters I promised. The Dread Sphinx is our second high toughness monster. Compared to the War Sphinx, it trades volume of attacks for a specialty in killing monsters and a higher strength. Flying also enables it to get charged easier. My experience with it has been bittersweet. In games with monsters, it has worked reasonably well, but against monsterless lists, it really lacks something. A good option if you are struggling against monsters, but not a unit I will include on most lists. The Colossus is our third monster. In comparison with the last two, it's less durable, but it's the most aggressive one we have, with the equivalent of 11 strength 6 attacks. It also has a wide array of interesting weapon options, with my favorite being the Buried Weapon. For some Initiative 3 attacks, the Giant Aspen Bow is also something that works well on lists with Heaven's Magic, which can be used to compensate the ballistic skill 2 of the Colossus. The Scales upgrade can work well on magic slow on magic. This monster is all about the offensive. Our first war machine is the Casket of Fatep. This unit's main ability is penalizing enemy wizards, and it should be the main reason you take it. Lots of players prefer low-level wizards who suffer a lot from a -1 to cast. I especially like combining it with an hierarch with the Book of Arcane Power, which ensures a 3-point advantage when dispelling. The second ability of the Casket is being able to cast Judgment on 2 dice easily, which can be used against lone units away from the General and BSV. Just remember that this spell also triggers the attribute, which can be used to heal the Casket or other unit nearby. When killed, the Casket unleashes a powerful curse, which damages all units nearby. Since our army is good at killing fast and light units, I tend to use the Casket as a trap, forcing the enemy to use a decent unit to kill the Casket and suffering his wrath. Our final unit is the Charner Catapult. It brings some long-range punishment to our enemies that none of our other units can match. For a low price, we can get access to a long-range ordnance weapon that can be used to kill infantry too. It can take an upgrade too, which increases its anti-infantry abilities, but I find it far too expensive for what it does. A 3 inches plate, in my opinion, is more than enough, but you could combine a basic catapult with an anti-infantry one too, to add more versatility to your list. Still, I prefer the basic version. While the previous list of units covered the most common dynasties, there are a few uncommon ones found on isolated places. These are variant armies that change drastically how Undying Dynasty works, and in general are less competitive. These auxiliary armies are the Terracotta Army and the Barrow Legion. Both require a pharaoh to unlock them. The Terracotta Army consists solely on constructs. Even their normal skeletons are animated statues. This makes them more durable than normal Undying Dynasty models, but they lose access to the more mobile aspects of the book. This auxiliary army excels at using incredibly tough chariots and deadly Necropolis Guard units led by their formidable character. These units are hard to deal frontally with, but beware, because a canny opponent will make use of the limited mobility of this auxiliary army to move around and kill the vulnerable targets or win objectives. The Barrow Legion, or other auxiliary army, focused more on metal than stone, and they lack the most impressive monsters, but they have heavier armor on most of their units, and their basic troops have even better equipment, with their cavalry being the only one that can be considered heavy cavalry in our army. Overall, I think the Undying Dynasty is a really good book and an intriguing army, with tons of ways to play them. The army is slow, but also relentless, with a bag full of interesting tricks. They require a good control of the board, unconventional movement, and synergistic use of their models to achieve victory. A hard army to master, but really rewarding to play, with plenty different ways to use them. From monsters heavy list, chariot legions, shooting heavy list, relentless armies of skeletons, deadly Death Stars, an ambushing list, and a balance between all of them. I hope you have enjoyed this review of the army, and I really wanted to thank to all the people from the 9H project. They have spent a lot of time making this book, and I think we can all enjoy it a lot. Back to my pyramid now, to awaken my legions. See you later, and I hope you enjoyed the book too.